Rain hissed against the pavement, turning the cul-de-sac into a shimmer of trembling light. A porch bulb flickered through the downpour, its glow stuttering over puddled asphalt. On the curb, a girl stood barefoot, no coat, her small fingers wrapped tight around a cracked porcelain doll. Her lips were pale, her shoulders shaking, yet she didn't cry. Across the street, Audrey watched from her kitchen window, her peppermint tea still steaming on the sill. The quiet ritual of another uneventful evening. Retirement had taught her to live gently, to let the world pass by behind curtains and familiar routines. But the sight of the barefoot girl in the rain shattered that peace, wrenching her old nurse's reflex awake. The house behind the child was blacked out, curtains drawn tight. No movement, only the restless conversation of rain. The girl lifted the doll close to her mouth and whispered something that trembled away in the storm. Audrey couldn't hear, but she could read the fear in that tiny body, the kind that knew to stay small. She opened her screen door halfway, rain splattering her slippers, heart pounding between caution and conscience. The girl looked up. Their eyes met through the rain, pleading met by hesitant resolve. Audrey's days blurred together since retirement. Each morning began with the sound of the mail slot clapping shut and ended with the same cup of peppermint tea cooling beside the couch. She liked to say she was resting her knees, though rest had grown lonelier than she'd expected. Her house sat at the far bend of a quiet Midwestern street, the kind where people still waved, but conversation rarely lasted past whether the predictable calm had been comfort, until the sight of the girl. She glanced again through the rain-streaked glass. No parent followed, no car idled nearby. Just that trembling figure framed by dark, her thin dress soaked and clinging. Audrey's throat went dry. She reached for the old quilt draped across the arm of her chair, the faded one her patients once called the sunshine blanket because of its yellow squares. It smelled faintly of lavender detergent and thyme. The storm shoved at her when she stepped outside. Water slapped her face, threading through the gray in her hair. She moved carefully down the steps, pulling the quilt close around her arms. "Hey, honey," she called softly. "You shouldn't be out here." The girl didn't move. She only shifted the doll in her arms, shielding its cracked face from the rain. Audrey's voice dropped to the tone she used long ago with frightened children in recovery. "It's all right. Let's get you warm." She reached, but the child stepped back. "She's sleeping," the girl murmured. "Don't wake her." The words barely carried above the storm. Audrey froze. "Sleeping," she repeated. Her gaze slid to the porcelain figure. Its painted lashes were worn away, one arm missing, its gown split at the seam. Still, the girl held it as though any wrong sound might break its dream. A chill deeper than rain crept through Audrey. "All right, then," she said gently. "We'll let her rest. You can come sit under my porch so she stays dry." The girl hesitated, eyes darting toward the dark house behind her. No flicker of light, no shadow moving inside. Only that stillness that sometimes hides chaos. Slowly, she nodded. Audrey draped the quilt around her small shoulders. The fabric sagged heavy with rain, but the girl clutched it close. Together, they crossed the street, each step splashing through mirrored puddles where streetlights fractured like broken coins. Under the porch roof, the air smelled of mud and birch leaves. The rain softened to a steady rhythm. Audrey crouched beside the girl, brushing damp hair away from her cheeks. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Chloe," she whispered. "Well, Chloe, I'm Audrey. You're safe here a moment." Chloe looked at her then, eyes the color of wet wood. Something in them, exhaustion, defiance, reminded Audrey of the tense waiting she'd seen in hospital corridors, the way children sized up adults before deciding whether they were safe. The doll tilted awkwardly in Chloe's lap. Its head had a long fissure across one cheek. Audrey found herself smoothing the corner of the quilt further over it, as if the gesture might mean something. "You're cold," she said. "I've got a fireplace inside." Chloe shook her head. "We can't go far." "We?" The girl pressed her lips together, silent again. Beside them, the porch light hummed, throwing their shadows in thin bands across the siding. Audrey didn't press further. She remembered how questions could shut a child down faster than silence ever did. so she simply sat beside her, listening to the softened rain. The rhythm steadied Chloe's breathing until the shaking eased, leaving only the faint click of porcelain when the doll settled against her arm. Audrey studied the child's small hands gripping the broken toy. Both were chipped at the nails, the kind of marks made not by play but by endurance. She looked once more toward the curtained house. Something was wrong there. She could feel it like pressure behind her ribs. When the storm eased to drizzle, she whispered, "Come on, Chloe. Let's keep her warm, too." And together they rose, the porch light flickering gently as the door opened to warmth and uncertainty. The front door moaned as Audrey pushed it open. Warmth drifted out from the living room fireplace, carrying the faint scent of old ash and lemon polish. Chloe stood on the threshold, bare feet leaving pale prints on the mat. The doll hung against her chest like a relic, its cracked gaze wide toward the sudden glow. "Come on in, sweetheart," Audrey said softly. "Fire's still strong." Chloe hesitated. A thin trail of water ran from her braid down her shoulder. "We can't stay," she whispered. "You can, just until you dry off," Audrey replied, lowering her voice to almost a hum. She motioned toward the sofa where a folded blanket waited. "I'll make some cocoa. You ever had it with marshmallows?" Chloe shook her head, but stepped inside. The clock above the mantel ticked, steady and kind. Audrey hung the damp quilt by the hearth, then filled an old kettle and set it on the stove. Steam rose quickly, curling through lamplight that painted both of them gold. When Audrey turned back, Chloe was sitting on the rug, near enough to feel the fire, but not close enough to trust it. She sat cross-legged, doll upright beside her, tiny coat draped protectively around its shoulders. "You can warm your hands," Audrey murmured. "Fire won't bite." Chloe extended her fingers just enough that heat reached them. The tremor in her shoulders softened. Still, her eyes kept sliding to the front window. "You waiting for someone?" Chloe nodded, though the gesture wavered. "My sister," she said. "She's little. I told her to wait by the bins. She doesn't like thunder." Audrey straightened slowly. "Your baby sister's outside?" "She's sleeping," Chloe answered with that same careful tone she'd used before, as though pronunciation itself could keep danger away. "Under the umbrella. She gets scared when it's loud." Audrey's chest tightened. "The bins. Out back of your house?" Chloe nodded again. "I can't stay long." Without another word, Audrey moved to the hallway closet, pulled down her raincoat, and handed another, smaller, unused, since her niece's visits, years back, to Chloe. "We'll go together," she said. Outside, the rain had thinned to a cold mist. Streetlights glowed like patient eyes, watching them cross the slick yard. The quiet between thunder rolls felt heavy as breath held too long. Chloe led the way, quick on small feet toward the narrow alley behind her house. A trash bin lay tipped sideways near the fence, its lid broken, plastic gleaming under the drizzle. Beneath an overturned umbrella mottled with cartoon stars was a tiny mound wrapped in a thin blanket. Audrey knelt, heart hammering. A toddler, barely 2, curled inside, thumb half in her mouth, hair wet and plastered to her forehead. She stirred at their approach, let out a whimper. "Lily," Chloe whispered, crouching to stroke her cheek. "It's okay. I came back." The baby blinked, dazed, then reached up with both arms. Chloe bent to lift her, adjusting the soaked blanket around her small body. Audrey spread her own coat wider. "Here, let me carry her," she said. But Chloe shook her head fiercely. "She's mine to hold." Audrey nodded. "Then let's get her warm." They hurried back toward the porch. Rain tapped soft applause on the umbrella, the doll bumping against Chloe's hip as she moved. Under the porch roof, Audrey reached to open the door and held it wide, for both girls. Inside again, the firelight turned their wet hair copper. Audrey layered another blanket across the hearth, spreading towels like a tiny nest. "Lay her here," she said gently. Chloe lowered Lily onto the towel, crouched beside her, murmuring words too soft to catch. The toddler twisted once, then sighed, her breathing settling into the deep rhythm only exhaustion allows. Audrey set a mug of cocoa near Chloe. "Careful, it's warm." Chloe nodded, eyes fixed on Lily. She didn't drink until Audrey joined her on the floor. How old is she? 2. Chloe's answer came without hesitation. She likes to hum when she's sleepy. Audrey smiled faintly. You take good care of her. Chloe blew on the cocoa, watching it ripple. She cries when it's loud at home. I tell her it's just the TV, but sometimes it's not. The words floated like brittle leaves in quiet water. Audrey chose not to interrupt their drift. Instead, she reached for a dry washcloth and dabbed gently at Lily's hair. She's burning up, Audrey murmured. Chloe's back stiffened. She just gets warm sometimes. It goes away. Old training stirred in Audrey's pulse. Check temperature, signs of dehydration, fever risk. But she saw the panic climb in Chloe's face and stopped. First warmth, then trust. The rest could wait. By the fire, the doll sat propped against the brick edge, its fractured cheek catching ember glow. Its shadow danced high across the wall, oddly whole despite the cracks. Audrey watched Chloe's gaze follow that shadow. You know, Audrey said softly, my sister broke her doll once too. I tried to fix it with glue from school. Did it work? Chloe asked without looking away. Not really, but she loved that I tried. A small smile touched Chloe's lips, fleeting but real. Lily stirred, whimpering. Chloe gathered her into her lap, swaying slightly in rhythm with the rain against the windows. The motion was instinctive, protective more than soothing. Audrey marveled at the steadiness in her small arms, the quiet authority children sometimes build when the world forgets to guard them. Let's keep her warm, too, Audrey whispered. Chloe nodded, and for the first time she leaned into the safe edge of an adult's presence. Together, they hunched close to the flames, while Lily's breath evened into small clouds of peace. The kettle hissed again on the stove. Outside, the rain softened to whisper. In that hush, the broken doll glowed softly by the fire, its delicate seams catching light, neither perfect nor dull, just mended enough to hold until morning. Thunder rolled low beyond the windows, a slow growl that made Lily whimper in her sleep. The house had turned inward, every sound muffled by thick walls and the steady hum of rain on the roof. Audrey adjusted the lamp down to a warm, amber glow that painted their shapes in gold. Chloe sat wrapped in a blanket near the hearth, the doll upright beside her, its shadow trembling over the brick in the flicker of flame. Do storms scare her? Audrey asked quietly. Chloe shook her head. Only when the yelling starts. Audrey paused with her hands around the teapot. Who's yelling, sweetheart? Chloe stared into her cup for a long time, tracing the rim with one finger. The answer came in small pieces, each one shaped by caution. When the TV's on too loud, it's not really the TV. Mom says it's just grown-up talk, but it sounds like breaking things. Rain pressed against the windows. The rhythm was so constant it felt like breathing, the world outside echoing what Chloe could not yet say. Audrey moved to the couch, lowering herself into the chair opposite. She didn't fill the silence. She let it rest, like oxygen around the truth. After a moment, Chloe whispered, Lily doesn't understand. She just cries, so I take her outside until the noise stops. You take her outside in the rain? Audrey's voice barely rose above the fire's crackle. She sleeps better under the sky, Chloe said. It's quieter than inside. Audrey watched her as the light quivered across that small, damp face. Beneath the soot on Chloe's cheek was a look she remembered too well, children learning to measure danger by sound. She folded her hands to hide their tremble. Does anyone know you leave? Chloe shook her head. Mom doesn't see us go. She's tired. She sleeps on the couch sometimes, even when the lights are on. The bottles make her sleep heavy. When she wakes, she cries too. The thunder cracked again, sharper this time. Lily stirred, startled, and Chloe instantly placed a hand on her back. Shh, she murmured. It's just clouds talking. Audrey felt the lump rise in her throat. You're very brave, she said, but you shouldn't have to be. Chloe didn't answer. Her eyes had followed the doll's reflection in the fire. She used to be Mommy's, she said after a while. From when Mommy was little. I dropped her one night. The same night, the yelling got so loud. The face broke and Mommy cried harder than I'd ever seen. After that, She put her in the cabinet, said broken things should stay still. The air between them thickened. Audrey leaned forward just enough that the lamplight found her lined hands. You kept her safe, anyway. I tried. Chloe's voice cracked on the word, but she doesn't look the same anymore. None of us do after storms, Audrey said softly. Chloe blinked at her, uncertain if that was comfort or confession. She took a careful sip of cocoa and set the mug down. Will Mom be mad I came here? I don't think so, Audrey replied. I think she'd be glad you both are safe tonight. The rain began to fade, trading thunder for a softer percussion of water spilling from the eaves. The house felt suspended, caught between one breath and the next. Audrey stood and fetched a fresh towel to tuck around Lily's small legs. She's sleeping well now. Warm toes mean good dreams. Chloe smiled faintly, then frowned. What will you tell people tomorrow? That I had guests who needed a dry roof, Audrey said, and that the tea tasted better for it. A tiny laugh escaped Chloe before she could hide it. It vanished almost instantly, replaced by guilt. Audrey leaned forward, meeting her eyes. It's all right to laugh. The sound doesn't hurt anyone. For the first time, Chloe met her gaze fully. You talk different than most grown-ups. How's that? You listen before you ask. Audrey's chest tightened around the simplicity of it. She wanted to reach out, to rest her palm against that trembling shoulder, but instinct told her time still mattered. Instead, she said quietly, When I was a nurse, I met children who thought being quiet kept the world safe. It didn't, but it taught them to see things adults miss. Like what? Like how someone really feels, even when they pretend they don't. She tipped her head toward the sofa. You must see a lot. Chloe nodded slowly. I know when Mom's going to cry. She smells different, like metal. She paused, frowning at her own words. And when it's bad, the lights flicker. Like the house knows, too. Audrey swallowed hard. You've been paying attention for a long time. I have to, Chloe whispered. If I don't, Lily won't be ready. The fire popped, scattering sparks that vanished before reaching the rug. In the hush that followed, Audrey felt something settle inside her, a shift from sympathy to fierce protection. No one's yelling here, she said. You both stay as long as you need. Just tonight, Chloe replied automatically. We'll see, Audrey murmured, unsure if she meant to reassure or to promise. Thunder faded into distance. The rain's rhythm slowed until it blended with Lily's breathing, small and even. Audrey drew the curtains wider, letting the faint streetlight cast a gentle halo around the hearth. Chloe leaned against the couch cushion, her eyelids drooping. The doll slipped from her grasp, resting on the blanket, fractured face shining like porcelain under glaze. Audrey sat very still, memory tugging at her. Faces of children from long ago, some who healed, others who simply disappeared from file folders into statistics. She had never learned which endings came for which. But this one, she told herself, might be different. This one she could see through to morning. When Chloe finally drifted into sleep, head tipped toward her sister, Audrey reached to steady the doll upright again. Its cracked edge caught her fingertip. A thin line of warmth bloomed where the porcelain grazed her skin. She exhaled slowly. Outside, the last of the thunder moved beyond the horizon. Inside, the only sounds left were the low murmur of fire and two children breathing. Audrey whispered to the quiet room, You're safe now. Then she sat back in her chair, resolve settling where fear had been. No one would wake them tonight. Not the rain, not the ghosts across the street, not the broken things still echoing in her memory. The promise was simple, almost invisible, but it held. She would keep watch until the first gray light returned. The night exhaled, and peace, fragile, borrowed but real, filled the space between their hearts. The first sound was rain easing into drizzle, each drop landing with a soft insistence on the roof above. Audrey stirred on the couch. The fire was only embers now, faint orange threads weaving through ash. The two girls still slept on the rug, tangled in the same quilt. Chloe's arm lay across Lily's middle, a small hand resting protectively over the toddler's ribs. Outside, dawn hovered like a held breath. The room smelled of smoke And Coco. Audrey rose quietly, joints protesting, and slipped into her kitchen slippers. The kettle clicked faintly when she set it on to boil. The rhythm steadied her nerves. She'd stayed awake most of the night, watching the rise and fall of small chests, until fatigue softened even her worry. Now, seeing them both safe in the early gray light, something like gratitude pulsed through the fog of her mind. When the oatmeal swirled in the pot, thickening to a pale gold, Audrey glanced toward the couch again. Chloe's eyes were open, half sleep, half guard duty. "Morning," Audrey murmured. The girl blinked. "Is it still raining?" "Only enough to wash the air clean." That earned the faintest nod. Audrey poured the oatmeal into bowls, added slices of apple, then crouched beside them. "Let's start slow," she said. "Warm first, plans later." Chloe accepted the bowl, but waited until Audrey handed one to Lily before touching hers. She nudged the spoon into Lily's smaller hand, guiding it with careful patience. When the toddler missed and dribbled oatmeal down her chin, Chloe wiped it with the corner of her sleeve before allowing herself a bite. "You feed her first?" Audrey asked gently. Chloe shrugged. "She gets hungry faster." It sounded rehearsed, as if hunger had always been timed by habit. Audrey's heart pinched. For a long moment she said nothing, letting the quiet fill with clinking spoons and steady breathing. She noticed then the small things, Chloe's fingers bearing faint scrapes, the way her shoulders tightened each time Lily coughed, the doll now resting beside her bowl as if waiting for breakfast, too. The house began to hum again, familiar domestic noises waking one by one. Audrey dialed the number Chloe had scribbled on a slip of paper the night before. It was meant to reach their mother. The line rang, then dissolved into static before the recorded voice said the mailbox was full. Audrey ended the call softly. "No answer yet," she said. Chloe's expression didn't change. "Sometimes she sleeps late." "Do you know her work schedule?" "She works at night, sometimes 2 jobs. I used to wait by the window, but she said that made her sad." Audrey nodded, setting the phone on the counter. She recognized the protective tone, the loyalty children built to survive uncertainty. The drizzle outside had turned to a fine mist that caught the first pale stretch of daylight. Audrey opened the curtains. The street glistened, quiet again, the houses across the way damp, but still. In the yard, her bird bath overflowed. 2 robins hopped along the fence, unbothered. Chloe rose carefully so as not to wake Lily and followed Audrey to the window. "It looks different in the day," she whispered. "It does," Audrey said. "Sometimes morning sorts truth from fear." Chloe studied the street. "Will we have to go back?" Audrey hesitated. "If your mom's there and wants you home, we'll walk together to see." Chloe's chin drew in slightly. "Only if you come." "I will." That seemed to settle something in her. She crouched again, adjusting Lily's blanket, then checked the doll's cracked cheek, as if confirming that everything she loved was still present. The reassurance looked almost ritualistic, proof that nothing had vanished during sleep. Around 9, the clouds began to break apart. Audrey helped Chloe rinse her bowl in the sink, the girl standing atop a small stool. "You were good help last night," Audrey said. Chloe glanced sideways, skeptical, but pleased. "You make quiet food," she observed. "Quiet food?" "Not noisy like bags or cans." Audrey smiled. "You notice everything, don't you?" Chloe thought for a second. "You have to, or you don't know when it's going to get bad." Audrey's hands paused in the dishwater. She turned the statement over like a stone, smooth with overuse. Then she leaned closer. "It doesn't get bad here. Not today." That earned a breath that was almost a sigh. By late morning, Lily toddled unsteadily around the living room, clutching a threadbare washcloth like a prize. The air smelled faintly of oatmeal and clean rain. Audrey fetched a pair of slippers from the closet, small, pink, once belonging to her niece, and offered them to Chloe. "They might be a bit big," she said. Chloe slid one on and grinned when it puffed around her toes. "They're warm. Then they're yours till we dry the rest." Audrey helped her find a sweater, too. They prepared to leave after lunch. The sky had settled into a pewter calm. Roads shimmered, gutters carrying away traces of night. Audrey packed a small box with fruit in the extra quilt. Before stepping out, she crouched to meet Chloe's eyes. "If we find your mom, we'll talk first. No surprises. Agreed?" Chloe nodded solemnly, eyes older than her years. "You might have to wake her gently." Audrey's heart tightened again. "We'll be gentle all around." Lily tugged at Chloe's sleeve. "Home?" Chloe bent down. "Yes, baby, but Miss Audrey's coming too." The toddler smiled, trusting instantly in what her sister offered. They stepped onto the porch where puddles reflected the overcast sky. The air carried that metallic scent of renewal. Audrey locked her door behind them, pocketing the key slowly as though sealing a promise. She looked down the street, modest homes with trimmed lawns, wind chimes tinkling, the world already moving past whatever had happened here last night. She adjusted the hood over Chloe's head and said, "All right, lead the way." Chloe took one small step forward, Lily's hand in hers. Both looked fragile against the gray morning, but there was a steadiness in their stride, a quiet resilience that pulled Audrey into motion beside them. Behind them, the fire died out completely, leaving only the faint scent of warmth in the air, waiting for evening to return. By noon, the mist had thinned to threads trailing across the pavement. Audrey guided the girls toward the bus stop, her tote heavy with fruit and the folded quilt. The clouds hung low, flattening the light into silver. Chloe walked ahead without hesitation, small shoulders squared beneath Audrey's spare coat. Lily shuffled between them, one mitten dangling from her wrist. The world moved in Monday rhythms, trucks grumbling past, distant radios spilling static joy, but the trio's pace stayed deliberate. Audrey noticed how Chloe's steps never strayed too far from curbs or walls, as if following invisible rules of survival. "Which street are we heading for?" Audrey asked. Chloe glanced back. "Maple Avenue, past the bus depot." Audrey nodded. "We'll catch the 5:30 line." They waited at the stop beside a shuttered diner. A newspaper fluttered near the curb, its pages soaked and colorless. Lily clutched Chloe's hand and began to hum, a soft tune without words. The sound tugged at Audrey's composure, the kind of sound children make when they've learned silence is safer than speech. When the bus arrived, its door folded open with a puff of air. The driver, an older man with weary eyes, nodded them aboard without question. They sat near the back. Audrey spread the quilt across Lily's lap, then watched scenery tremble by, warehouses, a pawn shop, rows of brick apartments scabbed with graffiti. "Do you always ride this one?" Audrey asked. "Sometimes," Chloe said. "When Mom's late, we wait at the swings near the depot until it gets too dark." Audrey pressed her lips together. The bus jerked to a stop by a convenience store, then continued through a stretch of cracked sidewalks and buckled curbs. By the time they stepped off, the air smelled faintly of fried oil and damp leaves. Chloe pointed to a narrow building half hidden by an overgrown hedge. "There!" The apartment door was ajar, hanging crooked on its hinges. Inside, a hallway bulb flickered over peeling linoleum. Audrey hesitated, her old training whispering through muscle memory. Check vital signs, gauge environment, proceed calmly. She reached for Chloe's shoulder. "Let me go first." Chloe didn't argue. She only tightened her grip on Lily. The apartment smelled of stale coffee, and the sour undertone of things left too long undone. A television hummed low from the next room. The couch was buried under unfolded laundry. Empty mugs lined the windowsill. And there, slumped beneath a thin blanket on the floor, was a woman, hair tangled, wrist resting over her eyes, breath shallow but steady. "Mom?" Chloe's voice was barely audible. The woman stirred, groaned softly, and turned toward them. Her eyes blinked against the dim light. It took a second for recognition to land. "Chloe, honey?" Her voice cracked like paper. Audrey stepped forward gently, crouching beside her. "Easy now, ma'am. I'm Audrey, your neighbor from across town. The girls waited out the storm with me last night." The woman sat up too fast, winced, then clutched her head. "Oh, God, what time is it?" "Almost 1. Her eyes darted to Chloe, then to Lily, who clung to her sister's coat, thumb in mouth. "They're all right?" "They're fine," Audrey said, keeping her tone even. "A little cold? Tired?" The woman's gaze softened for a moment before tears welled. I didn't mean. I worked double again. I came home and just sat down. She looked around the cluttered room, the fatigue etched at the corners of her mouth. Everything just keeps slipping away. Audrey felt the ache of recognition, the wear of too many shifts, too few hands. You've been holding a lot on your own, the woman laughed weakly. Holding? More like dropping. The sitter quit last week. The landlord turned off hot water again. I tell myself it's temporary. She buried her face in her palms. But they shouldn't have been out there. Chloe stood silent, doll pressed to her chest. Loyalty tangled with fear across her expression, that old reflex to protect the parent despite everything. Audrey reached out, touched the mother's sleeve. They found shelter when it got rough. That says something about the strength you taught them. The woman lowered her hands. Strength? Her eyes glistened. She's 8. Audrey nodded slowly, and already teaching me what perseverance looks like. A silence settled, raw, but clean. Lily broke it first, toddling forward with the damp washcloth still in her grasp. She offered it to her mother like peace. The woman took it, pressed it to her own cheek, and let out a shudder. I keep thinking one more paycheck and I'll fix it, she whispered. But I can't fix myself. Audrey met her gaze squarely. You don't have to fix it alone. There are neighbors who can help. Food pantry deliveries, church volunteers, community center childcare. The woman shook her head, shame flickering across her face. People talk. They already do, Audrey said softly. Might as well let them talk about helping. Chloe shifted closer to her mother and placed the doll in her lap. She's still broken, she said quietly. But I didn't throw her away. Her mother looked down at the porcelain face, the fine crack tracing its cheek like a scar. The smallest smile appeared, trembling but real. She reached for Chloe's hand. You kept her safe. I tried, Chloe murmured. That's more than enough. The oldest instinct inside Audrey, the nurse, the neighbor, the watcher, steadied her voice. I can connect you with someone at the family center. No judgment, just practical steps. The woman nodded slowly. Please. Audrey rose, easing stiffly to her feet. I'll make a few calls. For now, let's get everyone something to eat. She crossed to the kitchen, cleared the counter of cans and dishes until a small patch of laminate showed through. Within minutes, the scent of toast and warmed milk filled the tiny room. The girls ate perched at the edge of the couch, sharing bites of apple from Audrey's tote. Their mother leaned back, eyes heavy, but calmer. You don't even know us, she murmured. I know enough, Audrey replied. Enough to care. Chloe looked between them, then at the window where pale sunlight slipped through smeared glass. Can we stay here tonight? She asked quietly. Her mother met Audrey's eyes, nerves rising again. Audrey answered for both of them. If everyone's comfortable, yes, but I'll check in tomorrow, every morning if needed. The woman hesitated, then nodded through tears. Thank you, Audrey smiled gently. You're not alone. For a long while, no one spoke. The television's hum was replaced by Lily's sleepy murmur. Quiet held the room like balm. When Audrey finally gathered her things to leave, the mother walked her to the door. The hallway light flickered overhead. I'll try, she said simply. That's all any of us can promise. Audrey stepped into the corridor. Behind her, she heard the lock turn. Once, twice, not to shut her out, but to keep warmth in. As she descended the staircase, rain began again, light and forgiving. She glanced back. Through the cracked window, the apartment glowed with a faint, amber light, and for the first time, the door stayed open a little, letting air and possibility slip through. The week that followed unfolded quietly, like a wound closing under steady hands. Audrey began with one phone call to the community center director, an old colleague who still signed holiday cards for the children we never met. Within 2 days, a counselor stopped by the apartment on Maple Avenue, assessing, guiding, connecting. Within a week, the grocery van made a stop there too. Brown paper bags lined neatly at the door. When Audrey passed in the afternoons, she no longer saw the curtains drawn. A sliver of daylight now streamed through the window, hinting at movement inside. She didn't intrude. She simply waved if someone happened to look. Sometimes Chloe did, her smile unsure but warming with each attempt. The street began noticing. Mrs. Reed from 2 houses down brought over extra fruit she couldn't finish before it spoiled. Soon, the mechanic's daughter offered to fix the broken porch light at the Maple apartment for practice. Little things, done with a kind of shy precision, one after another, like stitches bringing a neighborhood back together. By early March, Lily had started at the daycare near the park, the same one where Audrey once volunteered. The first morning took coaxing. She clung to Chloe's leg, eyes brimming with alarm. But Miss Donna, a round woman with hands always scented of starch and soap, crouched to her level. "We've got crayons," she whispered, and that was enough. For Chloe, school resumed easier. The principal arranged a late start day so she could reacclimate. Audrey watched her from the gate one morning, small backpack hitched high, the repaired doll tucked halfway inside like a quiet passenger. She turned once to wave. The moment lanced through Audrey's chest, proof that trust could bloom again, even after delay. At home, the doll had found a temporary perch on Audrey's mantle while it awaited repair. One afternoon, teenage neighbor Ryan knocked shakily on her door, holding a small toolkit and a pair of magnifier glasses. "Heard about the broken doll," he muttered. "Figured I'd try." He'd been struggling in school, avoiding most adults since his father left, but something in Audrey's steady nod emboldened him. He spent 3 hours under her kitchen lamp, soft classical music humming in the background. When he finished, the crack still traced the porcelain cheek, thin as a healed scar. Audrey turned it gently in her hands. The mended surface caught the light, sending a quiet shimmer along the wall. "That line gives her character," Ryan said. "It does," Audrey replied, and meant it. Over the next days, Audrey noticed subtle changes curling through the block. Children's chalk drawings appeared on driveways. Someone replanted the marigolds near the mailbox that winter had bruised. The woman on Maple began walking to the corner store again, hair combed, eyes less dazed. Once, Audrey joined her for coffee at the little diner by the bus stop. "It still feels like drowning sometimes," the mother confessed, stirring sugar she didn't really need. "But now someone hands me a rope before I sink too far." "That's all any of us need," Audrey said. Across the window, 2 schoolgirls ran past the glass, laughing, Chloe among them, her braid flying behind her like a banner. She stopped to press her nose against the pane, waving before dashing onward. Lily's daycare sticker still clung crooked to her sleeve. A bright yellow sun. Audrey smiled into her cup. "She seems lighter," she murmured. The woman nodded, eyes wet with relief. "She sleeps now. She sings to Lily sometimes, little songs from commercials. I'd forgotten, children sing when they're safe." That night, Audrey sat on her own porch with a mug of mint tea, listening to the hum of nearby televisions and the faint sound of laughter drifting from distant apartments. The repaired doll rested beside her on the railing, its porcelain reflecting the street lamp's halo. She thought about how quiet the block had been when she first moved in, doors closing faster than greetings, every kindness feeling like trespass. Now laundry flapped from balconies again, and someone whistled while retrieving mail. Relief could be contagious, too, she realized. It just took one person to start the chain. Chloe often stopped by after school, each time bringing some tiny artifact, a crayoned drawing of 2 houses under a bright sky, a wilted dandelion she'd insisted was, for good days, a shell from the playground sandbox. She always left with a cookie and a reminder to stay curious. Once, while waiting for her ride home, Chloe pointed toward the doll on the shelf. "She's prettier with the crack," she said. "You think so?" "Makes her look like she's smiling different." Audrey set down her teacup, eyes softening. "Maybe broken things remember more about love." Chloe tilted her head, considering this, then nodded gravely as though filing it away. By Easter, the air smelled faintly of thawing soil and fresh paint. Porches up and down the street shimmered with new coats of color, each one a small declaration that the world could be tended back to life. And when the afternoon sun slid low, Its rays caught on the porcelain seam of the doll sitting by Audrey's window, scattering light across the room. For a moment, it looked whole again, and so did the block outside. Ordinary, imperfect, alive. Audrey closed her eyes and breathed in the warmth, hearing somewhere down the street the sweet, unguarded sound of children playing past curfew. When she finally rose to switch on her porch light, she paused to rest one hand over the doll's smooth head. The line across its cheek glowed faintly like the edge of dawn. In that soft gold reflection, she felt the street itself draw an easier breath, every window returning it, small proof that compassion, once lit, travels quietly from house to house. The April air outside Audrey's window felt gentler now, brushed with the faint smell of lilac and wet soil. Inside, late afternoon light crossed her writing desk in pale ribbons. She adjusted her reading glasses and opened her journal, the habit she used for everything she couldn't say aloud. Her fingers hesitated above the page before writing, "How many storms are still hidden behind small smiles?" She paused, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional laughter drifting from the street below. In the mirror above the desk, she caught her own reflection, hair loose, eyes softer than in winter. She thought of Chloe's quiet focus and the way Lily now toddled around the daycare garden, chasing bubbles under the watchful gaze of volunteers. Healing had begun to look ordinary, measured in lunches packed and homework folded correctly. Yet, Audrey wondered how long vigilance clings to a child who's learned to expect noise. The front door rattled with a soft knock. When she opened it, Chloe stood on the step, clutching the mended doll. "Mom said I could visit after school," she said. "Lily's napping." "Come in," Audrey smiled. "You'll track every tulip petal from that park on your shoes." Chloe grinned and stepped inside. The smell of oatmeal cookies drifted from the kitchen. She perched on a chair, studying the steam curling from a mug. "You write a lot," she observed. "I do," Audrey said, closing the notebook gently. "It helps me listen to myself when the house is too quiet." Chloe nodded. "I draw when things feel big." "What do you draw?" "Tiny stuff, like ants or buttons. If it's small, it can fit on one page." Audrey poured milk into her glass. "That sounds like a good plan. The world's easier to hold when you make it smaller first." They sat a while in the hush that comes when comfort needs no explanation. The repaired doll rested on the table between them, its faint seam gleaming. After finishing her cookie, Chloe's expression shifted. "Can I ask something?" "Of course. Some people said kids like me and Lily might get sent away if Mom messes up again. Is that true?" Audrey's breath caught. "Who told you that?" "Some girls at school. They said my mom's name sounds like one on file. I heard a teacher whisper too." She twisted the doll's skirt, eyes flicking up. "I don't want to leave Lily. I promised her we'd stay together." Audrey leaned closer, voice steady. Sometimes adults say things they don't understand, but families come in many shapes. What matters most is love that shows up day after day. "She says she's trying," Chloe whispered. "And she is." Audrey reached across the table, palm upward. "You two are safe. And if things ever get hard, there are plenty of us to help carry it." Chloe hesitated, then placed her small hand in Audrey's. Warmth passed between them, like a vow. After a while, Audrey asked, "You ever dance in the kitchen?" Chloe frowned. "Not really." "Well," Audrey said, rising and switching on an old radio near the stove, "every house should hear feet moving for joy once in a while." Soft music filled the room, a gentle rhythm with no words. Audrey swayed first, slow and deliberate, holding an imaginary partner. Chloe laughed despite herself. Then she slid off the chair, feet shuffling across linoleum. The doll watched from its spot on the counter, its porcelain cheek catching the rhythm of light. When the song ended, Chloe was grinning, hair falling loose from its braid. "I didn't know you could dance." "I didn't either," Audrey said, a blush of exertion in her cheeks. Together, they washed the glasses and left the radio humming under the kitchen window. As evening fell, the clouds outside glowed soft pink. Chloe lingered by the open door, doll pressed against her chest. "Sometimes I still get scared when it gets dark," she said. "It feels like the yelling might come back." Audrey crouched to her height. Dark's just the sky resting. Love doesn't stop because the lights go out. Chloe's eyes shimmered. You think it stays even when people break? Especially then, Audrey said gently. Love isn't quiet just because it's small. The words sat between them like a truth newly discovered. Chloe nodded, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. I'll remember that. She wrapped her arms briefly around Audrey's neck. Quick, fierce, certain. When the door closed behind her, the house felt peacefully full rather than empty. Audrey returned to her desk and reopened her notebook. The page waited, white and patient. She wrote, Resilience sounds like laughter spilling from places silence once lived. Later, she stood at the window. Across the street, porch lights blinked on in sequence, little pockets of gold threading through dusk. Somewhere, a child's bike bell chimed. The air carried mown grass and distant barbecue smoke. In the kitchen, the doll sat where Chloe had left it, whole in its own way. The faint seam on its face shone under lamplight, thin as a heartbeat. Audrey whispered to it, maybe to herself, too. We're all allowed to mend. Spring sunlight dipped low, slipping through curtains in long tremors. The world, once bruised by rain, blushed back to color. And in that quiet rebirth, an old nurse's heart rested, not because everything was fixed, but because hope, fragile yet breathing, had chosen to stay. Summer crept in quietly, carried on the scent of cut grass and sun-warmed clay. The rain barrels along Audrey's fence overflowed with clear water now, reminders of a storm long past. Across the cul-de-sac, laughter floated through open windows, the high, unsharpened sound of children freed from fear. It was late morning when Audrey arrived at the community garden, with her sleeve rolled up and a trowel in each hand. Rows of green hummed under honey-colored light. Chloe was already there, crouched in the dirt, hair tucked in a loose braid, Lily beside her, stabbing at soil with a plastic spoon. Their mother leaned on the fence, holding 3 cups of lemonade balanced inside a cracked muffin tin. Those sunflowers are nearly taller than you, Audrey called. Chloe straightened, one hand shading her eyes. They like this spot. It used to flood. Now it's just pretty. Audrey knelt beside her, easing seedlings into place. That's how most good things begin, in messy ground. Lily giggled, patting her palms in the dirt. She wore overalls 2 sizes too big, hand-me-downs from the daycare. Worm! She shouted. Audrey smiled and let the child deposit the thin creature safely under the sunflower bed. The garden had become the block's meeting place. Mr. Reed mowed the edges each Saturday without being asked. 2 teens from the high school art club painted a mural on the shed, a parade of bright umbrellas, each one different. And pinned beside them, in the window overlooking the plot, sat the porcelain doll. Its mended face gleamed against the glass. A guardian of sorts. While Chloe pulled weeds, Audrey glanced toward the children's mother sitting by the fence. Her eyes no longer sagged with hollow fatigue. Distance still curved around her movements, but sobriety lent her a new steadiness. When she caught Audrey watching, she smiled shyly. You ever think we'd come this far? Audrey brushed soil from her gloves. Honestly, I didn't think about distance, just the next step forward. The woman nodded. That first night, I thought you were judging me. I was remembering too much of myself, Audrey admitted. Patience I couldn't keep safe. Silence I mistook for strength. Chloe tells people you're our neighbor nurse, the one who fixes hearts. I just handed a few shovels, Audrey said. They both laughed softly, letting conversation melt into the hum of cicadas. By noon, the garden buzzed with quiet industry. Neighbors exchanging seeds, someone strumming a guitar under the shade tree. Lily toddled between plots, carrying a battered watering can. Each pour landed half on soil, half on her shoes. Her giggles stitched sunlight through the ordinary. Later, when they picnicked, Audrey spread the old yellow quilt, the sunshine one, laundered and faded smooth from years of use. The 3 sat shoulder to shoulder eating oatmeal cookies and slices of melon. Chloe dabbed juice from Lily's chin, then pulled something from her backpack. I made this at school, she said, offering a folded sheet of drawing paper. Audrey unfolded it carefully. The picture showed their garden in bloom, rows of flowers, the shed window shining, 3 figures under the sun. Above them, in careful block letters, were the words, "The people who stayed." The line struck straight through her chest. Audrey blinked hard, tracing the colored pencil strokes with one finger. "That's a fine thing to remember." Chloe beamed. "Mom helped with the words. Then it's doubly wise." She slipped the drawing into her notebook before the wind could claim it. Looking around, she thought about how easily stillness disguised grace. A porch light repaired, new curtains, bleaching in sunlight, laughter where once there'd been whispers. This was recovery. No fanfare, just chores done together. When Chloe wandered to chase butterflies with Lily, Audrey leaned back on her elbows and watched the sky deepen. The doll caught the sun in the shed window, porcelain cheek, flashing once like a wink. Its scar, thin and silvery, curved upward, changing its expression into something almost joyful. Evening settled, surface by surface, petals folding, voices fading, air smelling of mint and soil. Audrey rose to stack the plates while the girls ran loops around the raised beds. Their mother joined her at the edge of the garden. "You could have walked away that night," she said quietly. "I could have," Audrey answered. "But then I'd have missed all this." They stood a long moment watching the children weave between rows. Chloe scooped her sister into her arms. Both tumbled into laughter on the quilt. "The thing about storms," Audrey said, "is they wash away what can't root, makes room for what can." Her companion nodded, tears catching sunlight. When shadows grew long, the girls helped pack up. Lily fell asleep mid-sentence, cheek pressed to her sister's shoulder. Audrey brushed dust from the quilt and folded it slowly, the fabric creaking with memory. "Keep it at your place," she told the mother. "It belongs to your family now." "Oh, no." "Yes," Audrey smiled. "It's meant for new hands." Reluctantly, the woman accepted. "We'll take good care." "I know you will." They parted at the corner where the sidewalk split homeward. Audrey's steps slowed near her gate. Across the street, porch lights blinked on one by one, joining hers in gentle sequence, a sign that dusk had kept its promise. Quiet, connected, alive. Inside her kitchen, she set Chloe's drawing against a vase of garden flowers. The air smelled of lemon soap and sun-warm linen. She opened her journal and wrote, "Resilience isn't loud. It's the sound of dishes rinsed, children laughing through open windows, the world carrying on after rain." Before turning in, she looked once more through her window. The garden glowed silver under the moon. The doll in the shed caught that light, porcelain, shimmering between shadow and grace. Audrey whispered, "The rain had only washed away what needed to grow again." Beyond the glass, the night answered with the breathing rhythm of summer, a cricket's lullaby, the faint clap of screen doors, and from somewhere down the block, 2 children's voices rising clear, unafraid. The sound threaded through her chest like a heartbeat that at last felt steady. The sound of the children's laughter faded into the night air, leaving a stillness sweet and full. Audrey stood at her window for a long moment, resting one hand on the sill. The houses across the street glowed softly, each window its own quiet story of survival. She thought of how much a single act of noticing could carry. Sometimes it was enough to open a door, to offer warmth, to stay. Her voice came low, sure. The rain had only washed away what needed to grow again. Some truths didn't need thunder to be heard. They moved through gestures. A warm bowl, a mended toy, an evening free of fear. That was the melody of resilience she'd come to trust. She turned toward the table where Chloe's drawing rested, illuminated by the porch light. The words of the people who stayed shimmered faintly beneath clear glass. Audrey smiled softly. "That's what love sounds like," she murmured. "It stays, even in silence." To the listener, she added gently, "There are small storms nearby, every day, sometimes right next door. If you notice one, step closer. Offer a hand instead of turning away. That's how the world mends, one neighbor, one moment at a time." She breathed in, let it out slow. "If stories like this reach your heart, share them. They remind others to look, to care, to keep watch in the rain. A quiet pause. Thank you for staying with this story. See you in the next one.